Welcome to Between the Studs, the best LEGO podcast and / video series here at Atlanta Brick Co. TV. Today we've got a very interesting subject and a very special guest. We've got me, Mark, the host, but this is Levi.
Yep.
Now, Levi, have we ever had you here on a full interview before?
No, you've not had me for a full interview.
Because this is the first time we've had you here, sitting with a mic, talking about a subject that you're not an expert, but very confident with, right? So, but I think that we've at least caught you a few times on the live streams, because you'll be walking around getting pieces, and I'll be like, Levi, there's Levi. He's the best and the worst at the same time.
Yes.
Would you say our relationship is amiable or toxic?
Toxic most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time. We have a good time. I walk in, you give me this glare. I'm just like... and then, I'll show up and I'll just, Joe will dance in front of you because he thinks it's funny. Yeah. So we'll have all these crazy shenanigans going on. But, Levi, so when I mentioned you were in the live streams, what are you working on normally in the store? What's your main tasks here?
So I mostly inventory. So I just make sure all the pieces are in the sets that we sell as certified pre-owned. Mm-hmm. And that's my job.
That's your main purpose here, yeah. And I can't stress enough how important that is, because we're always trying to get new box sets. That's one of the best-selling items we have. However, we don't have any particular retail deal with LEGO. So one of the main ways we get sets is people like you, Levi, a handful of expert people putting those sets together, getting all the instructions, stickers, all that. So, yeah, props to you and your team there, Angie's team. So. Yeah, but also the reason you're here today is not necessarily because you sort sets, although that's cool, but because you are also dabble in the stop motion.
Yes, I dabble in the mystic arts of stop motion.
The magical dark arts of stop motion, wow. Because the reason, the main motivator for creating this video today was people in the comments were asking about, do you know anything about stop motion? I'm like, when I was many years ago, I kind of just dabbled in it a little bit, and I maybe made a few videos or two. We might even have a clip I can put up on the screen, but very minimal. And it didn't stick because it's so time consuming. But you've done it for, how long have you been working on stop motion?
I can't fully remember when I started. I believe I started in 2013.
Wow, yeah.
And just making super small videos with an iPod.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's how I've heard most people get their start with stop motion.
Mm-hmm. Really, on iPods, particularly.
Or not iPods,
low
but just
grade,
super small quality cameras.
Beginner level stuff for sure. They don't just start out with a pro kit and workshop and everything.
Yeah.
So let's see. How long have you been doing it? Would you say you're an expert at stop motion?
I wouldn't say I'm quite an expert. There's a billion people better than me at stop motion. But
there's always somebody better. But yeah, so
I definitely have gotten more comfortable making stop motion videos and releasing them on YouTube.
Yeah. So speaking of YouTube, you have a channel, right? Yes. Do you want to plug that for us really quick?
My channel is Leviathan Pictures, and I don't have a whole lot of videos on there, but.
Yeah, you got some clips and some stuff on there for people to see. Well, definitely put a link in the description, so definitely go subscribe to Levi and make sure his videos get some likes too, because we want to support our all of our employees here have their own creative pursuits on the side. We try to share those every now and then because it's very interesting. People want to know about stop motion. Yeah. What are some of the other subjects I want to ask you here? Let's see. First, before we dive into the nitty-gritty of stop motion and that stuff, you said you started in 2013. It's a pretty long time ago now, many years ago. What are some of the, you mentioned also other channels that are better than you, like some things that maybe inspired you. What are some of those channels that really this is so awesome, I want to do it too? What are some of those, a couple, name a few for us?
Brotherhood Workshop is a huge one.
One of my favorites. I'm glad you mentioned. I was going to mention if you didn't, but they are amazing. So.
And also there's the Action Brick. There's can't think of many others right now off the top of my head.
Brotherhood Workshop is one of the main ones, but there's a couple other peripheral channels that you like too. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen the Brotherhood Workshop videos, I mean, you clearly haven't looked up LEGO stop motion. They're some of the best and just funniest videos ever. That's interesting. So was it right after that he started posting that you began dabbling in it yourself, or were you working in it before some of these main inspirations came around and became popular?
So I found Brotherhood Workshop after I started.
Okay.
But, I just done a very few little clips, and then I found this channel. I was like that's what kept me going. Is like I eventually could possibly get to that point.
Yeah.
Of being that skilled
And that funny, and that yeah, they're really good. And then inspirations. So now I think, having covered the background of how you got into it and why you do and why it's important to you, what are some of the first steps you take when working on a clip now that you have a little experience under your belt? Like, what's the breakdown of the order of operations for us? Like, imagine somebody who's interviewing you, trying to figure out how to do stop motion.
Yeah. Which is technically
that's what we're doing. Yeah. Imagine there's a kid here who's like, I want to do stop motion. Where do you start? What's the first things you do to make a video?
So first off, you have to have your story. And depending on whether it's like a funny video or something more serious, you have to pick what you're most interested in. So like if it's a funny video, do what makes you laugh. And if it's a more purposeful, story-driven video, you have to make sure that you're really invested with that story. That way you can have the ability to continue on with it even whenever you don't fully feel like it.
Yeah.
It's a little harder to lose focus on that project.
You want to stay motivated, right? Yeah.
Yeah, then the next step would just be just start brainstorming characters, and I'll use my minifigure collection and just put together a bunch of random ones. Or if it's like a superhero themed one, I'll get my superhero minifigures together and just pick which ones I think would be the most interesting to animate with.
Yeah, so you get an assembly, a theme, a genre, and then you kind of pick out a few characters you want to highlight, right? Interesting.
Then I'll just kind of start with I'll start with the very beginning of the story, which isn't necessarily a required part of stop motion, since you can just edit the video to have the beginning clip be different. But
exactly.
I'll usually just start from the beginning of the story to the end. I'll also usually plan out my shots. If I know that one scene will be used multiple times throughout the video, I'll make sure to get all the scenes with that, all the clips with that scene filmed at one time.
Yes, like an actual movie studio would, because they don't want to have to rebuild it or reuse it.
Because if you have to end up rebuilding the set, usually there's something slightly different about the set whenever you're filming it.
They'll notice it a lot quicker in that 10-minute clip versus in several days worth of working, right? Yeah.
Or sometimes even several months.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's what originally, the reason I never stuck with it is because, to do a good job, you have to spend literally weeks, months, hours and hours and hours. So, major props to you. I don't have the patience for that. But, yeah, that's an interesting, is there any other, so you get the scenes, you film them in order, and I like the point that you made out that you don't necessarily have to film it in chronological order, because you can edit it, chunks, and move it. But you do generally just so that it's easier to flow. Yeah.
That way it's another thing with being invested with the story is that you know how your story is ending up, I guess. And for me, I can kind of build the story as I go a little bit more. I'll have a rough draft at the beginning, and then as I'm filming it, change the story. And I'm able to change the story because I haven't filmed any of the later parts yet.
Gotcha. So it can kind of evolve a little bit. And I also like your point where you'll have a rough draft. I was almost thinking with some animated movies and cartoons, you'll often have a storyboard. Pictures, really crude pictures, but nonetheless you'll have a kind of visual aid to what you're doing. Do you draw or write down script material of anything? Do you have anything on paper that you work on before you do these videos?
I've done it for a few different videos. I don't generally do it because for me it's a little bit more I'm able to stick with the project more if I am able to be more creative with it in the moment.
A little more flexible.
But I have written out and drawn out several different storyboard things for videos.
Gotcha. So it depends on the situation, but you generally stay pretty flexible.
And usually I write a storyboard with the intent of not following the storyboard fully.
It's a guideline. It's a beginning foundations which you will springboard.
It's more mild suggestion.
Yeah. Well, I like how it's almost a little bit open-ended, you could change it, you could do things this and that, depending on what you're seeing. So I think that's actually the marks of a great director. So very cool, Levi. That's awesome. Let's see. Planning and directing, we got that. Okay, so I have a question for you. A lot of stop motions have, they're more focused on the characters than the background generally, although the backgrounds are important. Would you say that the background kind of has a crossover with mock building? And would mock building skills translate well into that environment, or is it different? Do you think there's some really marked differences
there? There are some big differences. For stop motion, if you build a whole mock, usually you're building it so you can see it from a few different angles. With stop motion, you're just seeing it from the perspective of the camera.
Yeah.
And so you're wanting to build everything to where you're able to see it all clearly from the camera.
Gotcha.
Now, mock building experience definitely does help because it just adds more interesting details to your scene.
Yeah.
I'm not much of a mock builder, so I usually just have like flat walls in the back. But
well, even a little something helps, right?
Yeah, just a small, like those small details really help make, I would almost say more realistic, but it's Lego.
it's a Lego cartoon, right? Yeah, so it's pretty fantasy, but yeah. Interesting, yeah. So I know that in mock building, when you're creating something, you really have to know what you're doing it for. So with the stop motion being the primary focus, the mock building has to really work for that. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just you're building creation and taking some pictures of it. So you have to just kind of factor that in and plan that. Yeah. And I think you're right that some mock building skills will help, but it really doesn't change the fact that it's all about that stop motion, right? So, cool. Getting into your style of video and what you like to do. I know that some stop motion is very audio driven. Like some of the older ones that I've seen are like it's all like they'll have the two figures just sitting down, and then they'll be reading these great lines, and then kind of the audio does the comedy or the story. But and then some of the other ones, more like Brotherhood Workshop, are more physical. They're running around, chopping up stuff. So which ones do you prefer? And what do you find yourself doing? And then on the last question, what's the hardest one to do?
Yeah, so I think I usually have trouble with the audio part of making the videos. So usually I'll have help with that part at least.
Gotcha.
And I've only been able to really start learning that part of it recently.
Okay. Yeah, that I can imagine.
It definitely improves the quality of my videos.
I can imagine it's super difficult because doing this YouTube channel, it's like all I know is to plug in the mic and go. I don't know much about the audio mixing and changing, so that's very advanced stuff.
So I definitely prefer the more physical action of stop motion. Like Brotherhood Workshop definitely has a lot of audio work to it, but for me, I've always been more interested in how physically it works. Yeah. So that's how I make my videos.
Yeah.
So
would you say which one do you think is more challenging, or are they both challenging? Which kind of genre?
It depends on the person. Like I know a lot of people are just a lot better with sounds.
Yeah. Sound effects and things like that.
Sound effects will really sell a motion, but if you don't have the motion there in the first place, you can't sell the motion.
Yeah.
So
if you have like a 5-frame hit, it's not going to work as well as a really detailed. Yeah. Okay.
So for me, the motion is easier and more interesting, but for other people, I know it's reversed. So.
Gotcha. Going into the motion of it a little bit, I just had a thought. I remember taking some classes on animation. Yeah. I barely did anything, but I remember they were describing concepts like squish and stretch. Certain movements will have less frames to go faster or slower. Have you done any research? Have you taken any classes on animation? Is that something you're interested in?
I've taken a few. I think I've taken one animation class, but I've also gotten several stop motion books.
Nice. Yeah.
And those talked about slowing in and slowing out, and because a real life object will not just suddenly go to a halt.
Yeah.
It will kind of slowly go. Like if you have a rolling ball, it's not going to just suddenly like go from full speed to 0 in
unless something's stopping it. Yeah, there's a lot of momentum and physics and stuff like that.
And even if there's something stopping it, there's a secondary motion is like it's anything that happens kind of like before a motion or after a motion. That like if I'm about to throw a fist, first my hand goes back and then it goes forward.
So it doesn't just go. It goes. Yeah. There's a full. I have all those calculated little details. Interesting.
And since I've been able to add more of those into my videos, I've seen the quality go up over time.
And it's almost like if you go to all the extra effort to put those in, you may not even observe all of them, but it almost intuitively flows so much better, right? So.
Almost a stop motion artist's goal is to make it to where you don't notice some of the motion, because the more you don't notice it, the more it's realistic.
Yeah.
And you can tell the quality difference.
Yeah.
You notice it whenever it's not a little bit more janky.
Yeah. When it's not lining up correctly and the frames are too fast or too slow and the motion isn't natural, you can tell, versus when it's working, you almost won't be able to tell, and that's the success of a stop motion. Wow, that's I didn't really consider that going into this interview. That's really fun. Let's see. Physical versus dialogue. And so we talked about the audio. Oh, one thing that I was also not aware of that recently was that you're actually working on a commercial for our store featuring some of our products. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So this commercial is for the battle babies. So it's like the baby mech, the baby chopper, and the baby tank.
Yeah.
And they're fighting all the monsters that we sell. So like the xenomorph and the Grinch,
Demogorgon.
Yeah. So I've been able to experiment with a few different explosions and stuff that I know is more common in like action movies, because it's supposed to be like a trailer.
Yeah, exactly. Very battle-oriented action movie for these characters. And we're really focusing on our exclusive sets with just kind of background and areas that they're kind of interacting with each other?
Generally, yeah. I'm making it to where it's like you have just a ton of hero shots.
Yeah.
There's no need to have filler in a trailer.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be fairly cut down, right?
Yeah.
It's not a very long video. It's like a couple minutes probably. Yeah.
It's probably going to be less than a minute.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So, and then actually, the reason I said I didn't know about it is because I was asking. I knew that you did animation, but I didn't realize you were actively working on this for us. Because Chris and Justin asked you to do that, or just Chris?
Yeah, Chris and Justin asked me to make this trailer.
Very cool. And then Justin's going to edit it and get it out on our channel for us, because there's a lot of audio and just really precise titles and things like that he wanted to make sure were done just so, and I'm so thrilled he's going to be able to take care of that. So I'm looking forward to that. Another question, we're talking about the commercial, the different exclusive building kits that we have there. What are some of the favorite ones to work with, and what were some of the more difficult ones to work with as far as animation goes, especially the movement? So.
Sometimes those are one and the same thing, the difficult and fun, because with this Battle Babies stop motion, I've been able to experiment a lot more with joints, because some of these creatures are bigger than the average minifigure, and they have a lot more joints.
Yeah.
I've been able to just move it around a little bit more realistically, which has been fun and also very challenging. The Xenomorph has several leg joints.
And knees and ankles.
So
and
it was the hardest to make it look like it was walking a little bit more naturally. So.
Interesting. So the more joints allows more flexibility, but also makes it more difficult for each movement.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. So it's like the more complex it is, the more problems arise, but the more opportunity you have.
Yep.
Wow. You're kind of blowing my mind today, Levi. I like it. But I'm also like, wow, I didn't know all this stuff. That's cool. So you've done a few clips and videos and things. You're working on this one for us. Of all the stuff you've worked on, do you have a couple that you're particularly proud of? And are there some that you like? Obviously, that was my beginning. I would probably do things differently. What do you want to name them in particular? And we might have Lorelei drop them on the top. Otherwise, we'll just check out his channel. You'll probably see him there.
So one of my favorites is a super short one that's called Fight Scene that I've done, and it's just I had just kind of went into it without planning it out at all. I just wanted to have too many figures fighting and try a bunch of different techniques, like slowing in and slowing out. I wanted to try like a matrix bullet effect, so that's in there. I just got to have a lot of fun with that one, so I really like that one. One of the ones I'm most proud of that I've ever done was one I made in 2018 for a camp back in Arkansas. It is like an 8-minute video, I want to say.
That's pretty long. Yeah.
So that took me a few months to make.
Wow, that's awesome.
So that was when I was 13, I think.
Okay, so you had a little more time on your hands. So yeah, that's cool. So a couple of good clips. Were there any that you were like, you do things differently now that you know more stuff? Is there any things you could see growth since then?
Yeah, there's definitely some, like, I think any artist, after they've made something, goes back and looks at it and find something that they could do differently.
Exactly,
Like
for sure.
the fight scene, I could have made it longer and had a bit more interesting details in it. I got a bit lazy in a few parts of it.
Yeah, well, you're trying to be efficient with your time too, right? So.
But with the rules video one that was made in 2018, that one, there's a few different techniques that I wasn't fully aware of at that time that I definitely would integrate now.
Yeah.
There's this technique that I do that's you're erasing an object that's like below a character so that it looks like they're jumping or flying or whatever.
Yeah, so a little bit of Photoshop trickery.
And that was my first time actually doing it, but now that I've done it more, I think I'd be able to do it better.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, there's probably steps you can take to make it easier, and just knowing how to do it using the technology that's available, you can make it more appear a little more realistic. So
yeah.
Interesting. Are there any other like essential techniques that a beginner would want to look into? Because I'm sure there's tutorials how to do it, but like, do you just have a couple you can name off the top of your head that are good?
So the easiest technique is, I think, slowing in and slowing out. Like basically, it takes more pictures for a character to get started moving than in the middle of the action.
Yeah.
So like if they're raising their arm, slowly get into the full speed of the arm. And even just a couple pictures of it being a little bit slower really helps sell the motion a bit.
So in the motion of the arm going up, you would have like 4 frames here, 2 here, and then 4 frames at the other end. So there's more action going on, more work in the beginning and end of a movement. So
and that's just a few pictures more, and you can tell the quality goes up by like a ton whenever you do it.
Yeah,
so.
Cool.
Another technique, this one is a bit more advanced, but it's the erasure technique, where you have a clean plate and the plate where you have the minifigure or whatever jumping or flying. That way you can kind of use the clean plate and put it behind the actual picture and erase the picture, so you have the clean plate showing behind it, so it looks like the character is flying instead of standing on a bunch of bricks. Yeah, so
you remove where he was standing, put it on a new background. So using that, there's a lot of tools. What kind of, while we're talking about the editing stuff, what kind of software do you use, and what kind of software have you used in the past? Like, what was your evolution? Because I know not everyone starts with the best one first, right?
So I started with an app, like a free app. It was, I think, Stop Motion Studio. And that one, it was really simple. Had just a few different tools that were available. Yeah. I was able to start a bit of more slowing in and slowing out, secondary motion. And then after I worked, so the 2018 video that I made, the rules video, was the first time I used an actual camera, like a DSLR.
Right, yeah.
And that was the first time I used a more professional software, which is also the one I use now, which is Stop Motion Pro Eclipse. It has a lot more tools, not all of which I use, but it really allows you to control the project a lot more.
Gotcha.
And you're able to get more of the result that you want, and you're not limited by the software.
Cool. Yeah. And so the camera that you use, what kind of camera do you use for your...
I use a Canon EOS Rebel T6.
Do you have it with us?
Yes.
Oh, we can show it off real quick. I know I use a Canon Rebel T5 for my photos, so this is very similar to that.
Yeah, so I'll usually have a light on top of it to light the scene, but this one, with this lens, I'm able to get a little bit closer to the minifigures, and it really allows you to see more of the detail in the scene. Yeah. Which can be both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, you got to make sure everything's detailed, right?
Because if you happen to have a hair that falls onto the scene, the camera picks it up.
It looks like a huge splinter of wood. Wow.
With like an iPod, you don't see the hair.
You're not going to see anything like that. Yeah.
But with this, you'll pick up a lot more dust and stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
So I have to make sure that the scenes are clean by like either brushing them or blowing some like wind on them. So.
Yeah, you got like a little canned air or just even a little fan or something. Yeah. So wow. So you have to be very meticulous about that, because the preview screen is smaller than the real screen that's
Yeah.
going to be shown on, so you kind of have to just be really careful.
Well, so the way I do it is I connect the camera directly to the computer because that's the way that the software works.
Neat.
So I'm able to see the preview on the software
Yes.
that I use. And I'm able to adjust the lighting based on what it will actually end up looking like.
Cool. Awesome. So that does have quite a bit of control. And if you're seeing larger view what's going on, because I know that when I'm photographing mocks, I don't have the computer connected. I'm like looking or seeing what it looks like in the picture, so you have to make sure you take plenty of extras. But that's interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Do you think that software has a website we can link to in the description? We should be able to
probably
give people. Yeah, so we'll look that up and make sure that we got that for you. But if we don't, you should be able to Google it somewhere. We're pretty much done with, I think, most of the subjects we want to talk about. We'll show, before we close out, I did want to show Levi has a couple photos of his filming area and some of the lights that you use. You want to quickly describe the lights and why they're important?
So I use a bunch of like opposable desktop lamps.
Small lamps.
And generally I'll put like some sort of paper on it so that it kind of softens the light. It doesn't have such a harsh effect on the camera.
Yeah, diffuse a little bit, less shadows.
Yeah. And then I have two other lights that I'm able to adjust both the like how bright it is and the temperature of the light. So whether it's like more blue or like more of a yellowish light. So it really changes. It can really help change how the quality turns out.
Yeah, and like almost the mood, the color, things like that. Because with such a controlled environment, you got to make sure that you're controlling every aspect of it, including the lighting. So
lighting is actually probably one of the more important things because if the lighting changes in between picture, you notice it a lot more.
Yeah, it'll like flash because you're going through hundreds of pictures. If there's a couple of them are brighter, a couple of them are darker, you got a problem really quick. It's gonna look like.
So I film like 15 frames per second. So that's, if even like just one of those is off, you kind of notice it. If it was like a super high frame rate, it'd take a lot longer time, but maybe you'd miss that frame or whatever whenever you're watching it. But the important thing is controlling your lighting. If like you have sunlight coming through a window onto your set,
that's gonna
the
be nightmare.
sunlight will change with the cloud, and you'll have to wait for the next cloud to come in or move away.
You'll even see that light probably move in various directions as the sun moves and stuff. So you really want just lamps, full control. Interesting.
And if you can, put like something over the window so that no light is coming through it at all.
Yeah, I think I remember you telling me you were actually working in a closet area, right? Because
I work in a closet in my basement.
So nobody, like not even the tornadoes that could find you down there. Yeah, so make sure that when you're working on this stuff, it's really absolutely enclosed, sealed off, no dust. There's a lot of things. You got a long checklist of when you begin a project, making sure all these things are in place. That's crazy.
And oftentimes, if you're just beginning, that stuff doesn't matter as much because whenever you're starting out, you're just worried about how the story looks and the character looks, and that's a great start. Yeah,
you're just testing stuff at the beginning, but once you start to get kind of fancy with it and learn a few things, there's all this stuff you gotta be aware of, all the peripherals. Any other, while we're kind of talking about like beginning, you don't have to worry too much, but are there some things that beginners, we talked about a few techniques. We talked about lighting. Is there anything else that you would suggest for anyone trying to start out? Because the reason being is people are asking about stop motion, like what is stop motion? How do you even start? Anything else that pitfalls that could be avoided?
Like just the way I started is you don't need a great camera. You don't need an awesome lighting set.
Yeah.
And you don't need a whole lot of Lego actually.
Yeah, just a few characters, right? Yeah.
And really you just kind of get better by doing it. There's
practice.
Even though you can read and read books on the subject and watch YouTube videos on it, generally you won't fully know how to do it until you've actually done it.
Yeah.
And then you can start really learning.
Yeah. So with each video project that you work on, your experience begins to grow because you learn, that didn't work so well. Let me change that. Each time you improve. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's about it, Levi. Thank you so much for giving us this tour of stop motion. Really cool to hear about your projects and your process. But is there anything that you're working on in the future? We're still getting that commercial finished up. You got a few more things to do. Is there anything after that you got planned that you're interested to share, or no?
I don't really have anything planned out super well right now.
Okay.
Just a few different jokes and stuff floating around
All
that
right.
I could possibly animate in the future. So
Fun stuff. Well, I hope that, first of all, the commercial turns out great. Secondly, we may even do more with you in future if you got the time. We'll see.
Yeah.
We know you're a busy guy sorting all those sets. But, yeah. Well, thanks, Levi. It's awesome. All right. And thank you guys for watching and enjoying this little view of stop motion and learning more about it. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit the like, comment, and subscribe buttons. It really helps the channel. And we'll see you guys next time. We have so many more videos coming out soon, including that awesome commercial. So stay tuned.